So welcome back to part 2 of your uh, database programming video. So I just want to take you through what you would have expected for an example from your files and what we're now doing in SQL. So since we're working with SQL Server, therefore we are going to need or require access to our SQL Server. So normally we did this in files using our stream writer and our stream reader. And in order for us to use that, we're required to have the using system.io namespace. Now it's a different ballgame when we're dealing with SQL Server. The namespace that we use is using system.data so that you can be able to work with data, and then the one is using system.data. So there's supposed to be a dot over there, meaning .SQL client. And then here's the classes that are required. So one is the connection string, which we discussed in the previous video. One is the SQL command. One is the SQL data adapter. One's the data table, the data set, and the data reader. And all these three are responsible for the same kind of job. So you can choose one from these three. So over here, what you have is the connection string. So connection string represents a connection to a SQL Server database. So if you have, for an example, I think Visual Studio could have been that side. I think maybe it would have been easier. So like I said, over here you have a Visual Studio and you need connection to a database, and you're going to see exactly how that looks. So your connection string is going to have a number of properties that specify which database it needs to connect to. So your connection string, for an example, I'm not sure why I keep on making the same mistake, but it's fine. So your connection string is going to have the data source, which specify where exactly to find the database, and then it's going to have something that is called your initial catalog, which specify the name of the database that it should interact. So see, the first thing is to where's the database, and then once it finds the database, for an example in SQL Server, therefore it needs the data source. If it's in SQL Server or you've published in the cloud or online, therefore it's going to find it there. Then once it finds it, since there's quite a lot of databases inside, in your case in SQL Server, therefore you need to specify the name of the database that you want to interact with. And then the security, you just need to provide Windows authentication. So here's an example of a connection string. So the database, where is our database? It's local. So I think for your case, you should always use your local host at this point, because your database is in your computer. So that's now local. And then the initial catalog, and then you provide a database name. What's the name of the database that is in this computer that you want to interact with? And then the integrated security, you can either say SSPI or true, which means that you should use integrated security or Windows authentication. So now we said that you need an SQL connection. Now your SQL connection is the class that is responsible for connecting to a database. And then your SQL connection is going to have in its parameter and a connection string. And here's a string, and then it has all of these connection strings. So it's going to be passed there so that you can be able to use it. Now, there's a different language that you have to use in order for you to query from your database. Remember, we spoke about inserting to a database, which if you were using files would have been normally, for an example, writing to a file and then reading from your database, which would have been reading from a file which uses stream reader. And then there's now the new ones, which is updating, and then the deleting from a database. And you see that if you updating, therefore you should update in a one record. If you're deleting, you should only delete one record and not delete everything. So Now, if you are interacting with a database, this is from the previous video. So we said that you've got your Visual Studio, which where you write a program, and then you specify that it should interact with an SQL database through a connection string, and then the connection string is going to tell you everything about where the database is and what is the name of the database there. And then in order for you to specify which table you want to query, you should use your structured query language, which is SQL. If you want to, for an example, add, therefore you're going to use SQL. If you want to update, so everything that is queried happens inside the table. Okay. So here's your connection string. It says, please connect to your local host, which is our SQL database, and we want you work with this database. Then that is your database. And then if you're now wanting to say select all from this table, therefore that is going to be done. If you want to insert into the table, that is going to be done. And if you want to update from this table, that is going to be done through the query. So I'm hoping that this diagram actually presents to you of how you can actually work with your SQL server. So over here, we've got now the class that is called your SqlCommand. So your SqlCommand is a class that is now responsible for interacting with your table. So after you've had a connection string, you're going to have your SqlCommand. So the SqlCommand has the SQL, which is, for an example, your insert, your update, and everything. And then it also has your connection string. So that is supposed to be dbcon for connection string. And then, so here, the first thing is that it's going to know where to go. And then once it gets here, it's going to execute your SQL, whether or not you want to insert, whether or not you want to add. That is going to be handled by this class, your SqlCommand. And then you've got an SQL data adapter. So once the SqlCommand has interacted with this table, your data adapter is going to be responsible for translating, for an example, your data from SQL readable data to Visual Studio readable data. Okay, and I'm going to show you exactly. It's like using your normal adapter. If you cannot connect to a normal adapter, for an example, you need, to a normal wall socket, you need another adapter. So since this is from SQL, now it needs to be readable in Visual Studio. So that is why you need your SQL data adapter. And then, so you've got now your data set. The data set, the data table, and your data reader are what are now going to present data to your user, so that this data can be presented, for an example, to a data grid view, to a what else, to your controls in your form. So I think that is all about the classes. Now we're going to look at the controls that we can use for representing data. Thank you for listening to my video.